Okay, thanks for the question, Amy. All right, so I'm going to put on a few different hats here to answer this question today. So the first point I'd make is political. So we live in what we call a Western democracy, not necessarily West in terms of our geography, but in terms of our background, cultural heritage. We live in a society that is based on freedom, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom to determine your own destiny. And proof that this is a good system is that people from all over the world are basically trying to leave bad places in the world and come to Western democracies. All right, so in that regard, I would say whatever we decide as a people that live in a Western democracy, that have the vote in order to make a decision, I would accept as the decision of the democracy that I'm privileged to live in. All right, I don't believe democracies are perfect, but pretty much they're the best system that we've got on the planet today. From a legal perspective, just to change hats here for a minute, what I've just said about democracy leads to something else, and that is, what do we want to preserve legally in our country? So I mentioned freedom of speech. The main thing that I see as a problem with the whole gay marriage question, the whole gay marriage debate, is that anyone who would want to rock the boat in terms of having a different perspective or a different opinion to what I would call the liberal view of this whole issue is soon vilified and basically slandered and accused of all sorts of things like being homophobic or sexist, or so you get a whole lot of epithets and taglines, cheap throwaway words thrown at people. And to me, I'm a person who believes in robust debate, so it's not enough just to dismiss someone as this, that or the other. If you've got a good idea and a good opinion, then you should be willing to debate it in the marketplace and not just try and shut people down because they have an opinion that's different to yours. And I would say that if we were looking for something to enshrine in law, rather than gay marriage, I would think that free speech is what should be enshrined in our law here. We don't have what the United States has. We don't have a constitution that gives everybody the right to free speech. And in fact, people are now trying to tag things as hate speech if they don't go along with the narrative that's pushed by one side, and that automatically is shutting down debate and shutting down the right.
I didn't actually know we didn't have freedom of speech here. I thought we did.
No, it's not preserved. No. In fact, there's a law called 18C, which is a controversial law, and it talks about offensive language. In other words, if you say something that someone deems to be offensive, they can basically haul you off to the court because they're offended. Now, the problem is, who decides what's offensive? All right, so it's a whole legal minefield. No, our right to free speech is not protected, but I would say that is one of the most important things that needs to be protected. For me, it's not gay marriage and the whether or not I will go along with the decision of my society. But I would hope that this question could be robustly debated before we decide to take a decision that basically goes against what marriage has been since when marriage existed, by definition. All right, so I'm just going to swap hats again. So I've gone political, legal. Now I'm going to go to philosophical. So from the beginning of time, marriage has been the union of opposites, right? So it's the opposite sex coming together to create a family unit, which is the basis of all society. So the family unit is what builds our society. So now we're asked to accept a definition of marriage that is essentially the opposite of what I just said. So marriage being the union of opposites, gay marriage, whatever that is a union of sames, all right? So philosophically, that to me is a logical oxymoron. So to me, whatever you're talking about is not what marriage ever was as originally defined. The second thing is, I think while we talk about gay rights, and if we put gay marriage on an equal footage with traditional marriage, who's talking about the rights of the children that are to be raised in these relationships? Because if gay marriage has the same status, then they would have the same status to adopt children, for instance, as a normal couple. And if anyone tried to discriminate against a man and a woman adopting a child versus two men or two women adopting a child, under our Racial Discrimination Act, that would be an illegal thing. So you could not discriminate about what would be the best environment to raise a child in. So again, from a philosophical perspective, I would say men and women bring different talents and skills to the raising of a child. Right? So I know that the feminist narrative is that men are the same as women, but I'm sorry, common sense and experience and what I know of the world, to me personally, would indicate that is not the case. Women have different skills and different abilities, and it doesn't mean there's any difference in equality in terms of our moral value, our emotional value. All of those things are equal, but we have different roles and different talents and abilities that we bring to any situation. So to me, a child that has a mother and a father bringing both of those skills in an ideal world would the child has a role model in terms of a male and a role model in terms of a female to give them the right nurturing that they need to grow into a well-rounded individual. Doesn't mean there won't be exceptions to the rule. Oh yeah, I grew up with gay parents and I'm fine, whatever. But I'm saying that may not always be the case, and there is no studies really that are deep enough to explain what making a decision like this might mean going into the future. All right, so to me that's somewhat of an issue. I guess the last thing I'll talk about is a Christian response. All right, so to me, the Bible talks about what constitutes our standing with God, what are the sort of things that will separate us from God, and things like lying, for instance. There's a whole bunch of things that are listed out in Scripture as things that are not acceptable as far as God's concerned. And people will try and tell you that the only things said about homosexuality are Old Testament, and I'm here to tell you that's not true. You can read Romans chapter 1, and it talks about men working with men, that which is unseemly, and even their women burned in their lusts one for another. All right, and it talks it in terms of when God is judging a nation or when God is judging a society. So from a Christian point of view, and that's a purely Christian point of view from my point of view, I see a problem with it if you're going to call yourself a Christian and then advocate for gay marriage, because to me it's not what the Bible teaches as an acceptable sort of lifestyle or marriage in God's sight. Now, however, I want to qualify that by saying everyone has sinned at some stage and at some level. If you've ever told a lie, then you've committed a sin.
Because I was going to say, with the Bible there is things like any person who has committed like adultery and stuff like that, that's all like sin.
That's right.
in the eyes of the Bible. So it's not that they hate the fact that they're with a man or a woman, it's just anything regarding that, like sex before marriage, all that kind of stuff, that's all a sin
categorised in the
Bible,
same thing. But yes, but my only point is that homosexuality is also characterised as one of those things. All right, so for me as a Christian, I couldn't argue for that. Now, remember, I started this conversation by saying whatever my society decides to accept, fine, it's a democracy, and that's the way things roll. It doesn't, to me, as a bit of a libertarian as well, whatever people want to do, that's up to them, right? So I'm not here to meddle, but at the same time, I'm not willing to commit cultural suicide and say that the traditions, that we've believed in and held to, and the definitions that we have going back thousands of years, that we should just toss them out because a certain group in society says that that's not fair as far as they're concerned. Well, I'm sorry, where's the line? So we've had all these cultural things that have made us this a great country, made Western democracies great. Should we just, without questioning, say, all right, we're not going to do that anymore, we're going to allow gay people to adopt children, or whatever else the situation is? Are we heading down a rocky road or a dangerous road into a problematic future if we head in that direction? And I mean, this conversation spreads to a whole lot of things because, for instance, I said before, people are fleeing other nations to Western democracies. And they're coming from failed socialist, communist states, they're coming from failed Islamic states. All right, so these other forms of government are failing, all right? And so immigration's another thing, you could have a deep and long discussion with, but unfortunately, just like gay marriage is called a homophobe, if you want to talk about these other things, you're called a xenophobe, Islamophobe,
Yeah.
right? So to me, coming back to free speech, that's probably the most important thing. We need to be able to debate, to discuss. If you've got an idea, be brave enough to throw it out into the marketplace and be prepared to argue your case and bring facts and evidence. Feelings are not an argument. That is not an argument. You need to bring rational discussion. You need to bring logic and statistics and data to a discussion in order for it to be a reasonable debate. Okay? That's about all I have to say on gay marriage.